So I'd like to welcome everyone to the third session on the third round of community workshops for the Port Dover Secondary Plan. This afternoon's session is focusing on natural features. My name is Donna Hine. I'm a partner at the Planning Partnership, and I'm going to introduce my business partner, Ron Palmer, who will be presenting the content of the presentation, and then ask Tricia Givens to introduce the people from the county and to give a few words of welcome.
Sure. Thanks, Donna. So most of you on the call probably know who I am, but I'm Tricia Givens, the Director of Planning for Norfolk County. And thanks everybody for joining us this afternoon. Also here on the call are Jennifer Catarino, our Senior Planner and Project Lead for this project, and Fabian Sarah, one of our planners who's also providing some support to this project and other growth-related projects. So welcome everybody, and I look forward to some good discussion. Thanks, Donna.
Thanks, Tricia. So everybody's seeing my screen. We're going to focus, the topic of focus conversation today is on natural features. I want to start by just summarizing some of the consultation that we've been doing over the past year-ish, year and a half. We've had several meetings with our county staff team. It's really been terrific. We've touched base all along the way since we began. We began the exercise in May 2020 with one-on-one conversations with counselors, and that was really helpful for us to kind of set a foundation of what counselors were interested in. We did a presentation of the results of our background work and the first workshop that we had to council in August of 2020. We've had two workshops with the community, one in June to go through, June 2020, to go through what we were learning through our background inventory and analysis, where we looked at the entire Port Dover area and we looked at planning, natural features, transportation, servicing, urban design. Then we had another workshop with the community in October of 2020 when we were looking at and talking about some key directions and some opportunities for change. And it was at that session in October that members of our team were drawing in real time interactive on the screen to explore some options for the waterfront and downtown in particular. We had a conversation along the way with the Waterfront Preservation Committee. That was last July. We met with the developers in the undeveloped area around the built up area of Port Dover. Had conversations with them last June and July. And then we've had so far three meetings with a working group that has been set up by the county. I will hand it over to Ron just to get us started on the natural features focus.
Thanks, Donna. Before I get into the details of the natural features discussion, I'll talk a little bit about what's in the plan generally and what's the foundational elements that we're looking at. This secondary plan provides, it starts with a vision statement and principles that support that statement. That work was fundamentally derived from the consultation process that Donna described. It's still evolving, but certainly those are the foundational elements of the plan. Following that, we include a section on objectives and policies that focus on building a successful community. And those are a whole host of overarching policies that are intended to deal with specific issues like affordable housing and sustainability and resiliency, important topics that cover all of the planning decisions that happen in Port Dover. An important part of this plan is growth management. And the idea here is to identify the key components of the community and talk about growth, how much growth, where growth should occur, and how it will be managed. It's very important here in Port Dover that land use decisions are completely linked with the availability of service infrastructure, sewer, water, and road network improvements. So that's all discussed in the growth management section. The next section talks about land use policies. And here we talk about land uses that are permitted everywhere, land uses that are prohibited everywhere. And again, these are policies that set up the next section, which is the land use designations. The land use designations are the individual areas of the town, the community, that have specific policy frameworks that manage development approvals over time. So every property within Port Dover is assigned a land use designation, and this plan provides the policy framework for each of those designations. Also important are networks and infrastructure development. As I mentioned earlier, we do need to talk about key elements of service infrastructure. First of all, in growth management, it's about capacity and assigning capacity. And in this section, networks and infrastructure, it talks about what they are, how they are to unfold over time, what they are to include. They deal with stormwater management and active transportation. A lot of the networks and infrastructure development section refers back to the county official plan, but there are still some new elements that are included that are more specific to Port Dover. Implementation and monitoring, similar to networks and infrastructure development, a lot of the empowering policy framework that allows the county to use various tools under the Planning Act are included in the county official plan already. So we've simply mostly made reference back to those policies, except where specific policies for Port Dover were appropriate. Next slide. As I mentioned, Port Dover secondary plan starts with a vision statement, and we introduce key topics: healthy, sustainable, and complete. We talk about the role of history and heritage. And importantly, we talk about new development, beautiful neighborhoods, green spaces, the protection of the natural areas, which is the topic for today, and the active transportation elements, as well as Port Dover's role as a service center, providing retail and service commercial uses in a couple of locations. What we learned over the course of the study so far is that the downtown and what is defined as the urban waterfront area are really the character giving or image giving components of the community that are significant generators of revenue through the attraction of tourists. So we want to make sure that the residential areas are lovely, but also that the downtown and urban waterfront can continue to attract tourism and ensure that they are successful over the long term. Next slide. Natural heritage is considered in principle number 5, and these are strong words: protect the health and connectivity of a network of public spaces, natural heritage features, and their associated ecological functions. That wording is not by mistake, and I'll talk a little bit about why that is when I get into the discussion about the natural heritage component. The natural heritage system in Port Dover is broken out into 3 categories. The first one is hazard lands, and that has 2 subcategories. One are the hazard lands, the flood-prone areas associated with the Lynn River and the Black Creek and Silver Lake. Provincially significant wetlands, which are identified throughout the community, and particularly a large one at the far north end of Silver Lake. And then a host of significant woodlots that are sprinkled throughout the community, typically in combination with hazard lands or provincially significant wetlands. These features are all identified in accordance with provincial guidelines. And the way we establish the definition of these features is based on a whole host of information provided by the Conservation Authority, both of them, the Ministry of Natural Resources, and the county itself. In general, we put these features on the map based on the information that we have. And there is always an opportunity to do additional studies in support of development that can modify those boundaries based on much more detailed ecological work. Next slide. So this is the Schedule B, the land use schedule. And here, you may recall I mentioned the natural heritage system is made up of provincially significant wetlands, and those are in the brighter blue. And there's a number of them in Port Dover. The hazard lands are all identified with a vertical hatch. And as you can see, they cover some wetlands, they cover Silver Lake, they're in through the urban waterfront designation and in the downtown designation, and then along the Black Creek outside of the urban waterfront area. Next are the significant woodlands, and they are in the dark green color. They are typically, as I said before, associated with other natural heritage features. Typically here in Port Dover, they are creek valleys that currently exist. Next slide. In terms of the policy framework, it is a requirement of provincial policy that the municipality identify natural heritage features and their associated ecological functions and ensure that they are protected from development. In our work, we've also provided some policy that talks about minimizing development that encroaches or negatively impacts any of those features. But we also want to make sure that there are access points and street frontage to promote views into these features and to ensure that if they're associated with any trail connections, that they are accessible from the street network. Next slide. Again, in terms of design policies, we want to create views and vistas into the natural heritage system. We want to make sure that parks and open spaces can be added to or adjacent to these features. And we want to make sure that where we can, backlotting of development is avoided as much as possible. There are a host of environmental concerns that are related to backlotting a natural heritage feature. Next slide. So in terms of the actual policy frameworks, the hazard land policies are identified in the Norfolk County Official Plan. The Norfolk County Official Plan was last updated in January of 2020. So it was our understanding and our reading of those policies that they are up to date and there is no need to repeat them or update them in this secondary plan. So in terms of hazard lands, we refer back to the Norfolk County Official Plan. And that does include one site-specific policy area for a restaurant. And that is identified in the secondary plan in section 611B. And it's also identified on Schedule B. As I mentioned, hazard lands are part of the riverine system and Silver Lake inland in Port Dover. And those lines are based on the storm event, Hurricane Hazel, from way back in 1954. The other hazard land elements in Port Dover are along the entire Lake Erie shoreline. And that's a different type of hazard land, but it certainly is related to the activities of wave action, water level changes, and other erosion opportunities that happen out there. Fundamentally, hazard lands are a significant deterrent to development, and there's not really development that is to occur within the hazard lands, except under very specific circumstances. The next one, the provincially significant wetland designation, though that policy framework is provided in section 7.4 of the Norfolk County Official Plan. Again, up to date, no need to repeat or redo in this secondary plan. And so the policies of that component of the official plan continue to apply. Within the significant woodlands designation, we have created a policy framework. Some of it comes from existing policy in the Norfolk official plan, but we wanted to put it all together in one place and make sure that we're dealing with significant woodlands in an appropriate way. Here, primarily, if development is to occur in proximity or within a woodland, a tree preservation plan is required. Those have to be done by appropriately qualified professionals, and they identify present conditions and make recommendations on tree preservation. A key principle here is that if there is a net loss of tree cover resulting from a development application, the county will be looking for the replacement of those trees somewhere else, either on the same site or somewhere within Port Dover. So that's an important principle that we wanted to make sure got into the Port Dover secondary plan. Next slide.
So what happens after these series of meetings is that the county will be collecting all of the comments on the secondary plan. In part, we're keeping a good record of input that we get in these workshops, in these sessions, and then we're also extending an invitation for people to send thoughts in by email. By the end of July, we also have a fourth meeting with our community working group lined up for July 21st. We'll be then preparing the next draft of the secondary plan and aim to have the statutory public meeting in September. And in advance of that, the next draft would be posted online and meet the requirements of the Planning Act. So with that, I'm happy to, I'll just put up this slide. I'm happy to use this as the backdrop for any questions. And we have a small group, there's 14 people on the call. So I'm happy for you to just turn on your cameras if you want and ask your question. Wave your hand. You can use the icon, the reaction in the reactions folder. That's in the one that says 3 dots in your toolbar. It might say more. Click on that. You can see the word reactions. Click on that and you'll get the raise hand function.
Donna, why don't you put on the slide that's just the map?
Okay.
It's a little bit bigger.
Here we go. And I'm also happy, I'll just run down my list and I'll just call your first name out. And I'll just keep an eye out for your mic coming on. I see Kay, your mic is on. Not sure if that's by mistake or if you have a question or comment. And then Cindy. Or Eldon.
Did you want me to turn my mic on or off?
Oh yeah, sorry, Cindy. I'm going to go down the list, and when I call out your name, I'll just keep an eye out if your mics go on, if you have any questions that you want to share. Eldon.
You have a question.
There you go.
In terms of replacing trees, I think that's interesting. I'm wondering if there might be an opportunity for maybe cash in lieu. Sometimes it might be difficult to make arrangements to plant trees on other properties, depending on where they're most desired. And if cash in lieu is provided, then it gives the county the opportunity to have a tree program that is funded by development.
That's an interesting twist on it, Eldon. I don't know if that actually has to be a policy, because it could be that there's just an agreement between the developer and the county that says we're going to provide X trees or the money to acquire those trees. Certainly there's lots of property in Port Dover where trees can be planted, municipal property, countywide owned property. But it's an interesting thought, and I will have a chat with staff about whether that should be added to the policy.
And Zelda. Heidi or Heidi. And then Jim. There you go, Jim. Hi, Jim.
Oh, hi, Donna. I won't introduce myself again. I will comment though that you call us on your overhead of committee. Our formal name is association.
Okay.
And
Okay.
we actually have, prior to COVID, we had 90 paid members.
Oh,
So we're down to about 40 or so now, but trying to rebuild.
okay.
At the last session, I mentioned that, and by the way, I'm going to be the only one speaking from the association today, just to give other people the chance. But I have spoken with other people in the association, and this is sort of the amalgam of our
Okay.
feedback, and so it might be a little bit lengthy, so bear with me.
Okay.
The last session, I quoted the mayor who said that maintaining public access should be a priority for all levels of government, and we were pleased to see in today's Simcoe Reformer, Brandon Sloan quoted as putting Simcoe and Norfolk County on the map with the redevelopment of the waterfront in Simcoe. So there's obviously a recognition that waterfront is very important to all people in all areas of the county. I'm just going to get into a series of questions here. I'm wondering what drives the need for urban forestry guidelines. I'm glad to see them there. And I guess the reason for my question is, would it be appropriate to have waterfront guidelines?
With respect to plant material, you mean, or because we do have design guidelines that address the water.
But you don't have something specifically like you do forestry guidelines, a specific appendix.
For waterfront locations, you mean appropriate?
No, for waterfront guidelines. Just like in the forestry guidelines lists out a number of, I don't have them present here, but it would be guidelines in terms of the development on the waterfront. And this gets into the whole issue that we see the waterfront, not just the urban waterfront, using your term that you've used. We think urban waterfront is a confusing title because all of the waterways are in the urban area. Everybody would see it that way. But why can't, there's an appendix detailing guidelines for forestry. Why would there not be one for waterfront?
Well, so we do have guidelines that deal with waterfront sites.
But they're individual. Like, for example, there's one in Silver Lake. There's one in what you're called the urban. There isn't one for Black Creek up to the boundary of Port Dover.
I see.
So I'm wondering, it might be a convenient way of dealing with the whole issue of waterfront by having guidelines. But I guess I get back to my initial question: what drove the need for an urban forestry guideline, and would it be appropriate to have a waterfront guideline? Would there be anything served by having one?
So Ron, so just to clarify, we do have a chapter that deals with waterfront sites, but it's in the urban area. That is correct.
A hazard land designation that applies adjacent to all the water's edge is fundamentally a designation that doesn't permit development. So it wouldn't, I'm not sure, outside of the urban waterfront, and I'll get to that in a minute, Outside of the urban waterfront, there's no development.
But can I just, on that point,
So you don't
Ron,
need design guidelines.
Ron,
There's no
just on that point, sorry, just on that point though, what we're talking about is access to that area and guaranteeing access both visually and physically.
Well, that's not a guideline. That's a policy discussion. And we have included policies about opportunities to acquire access. Access over private property would have to be considered through easement. The most appropriate kind of public access is publicly owned access. And that requires property acquisition for the most part, because there's not a lot in Porto that is publicly owned. So there is a policy in the plan that talks about opportunities for acquisition. But at the end of the day, that's not a design guideline.
Well,
Ask
Ron, just on the point about publicly owned, there are a number of Vista parks that I could identify to you right now that are on publicly owned property.
And there's nothing stopping anybody from providing access through those sites if it's feasible. That's a public decision to be made.
Right, and that's why we were wanting it, asking the question, and I guess I'm getting the answer is no, a waterfront guideline would not be appropriate.
Provision of access is not a guideline. That's a policy that needs to be in the plan.
Okay. Okay.
And
So-
I think I'm just looking at Jim, our guidelines for Vista Parks, and I believe we do talk about to enhance connectivity, clearly define access and views to the water's edge. So we are accommodating that in the guidelines in the park.
Yeah, it's
Description.
just that we
Well,
get we're concerned that it's just in specific areas where that could be construed as applying, and what we're wanting to do is try to ensure that it's clear we're talking about the entire waterfront and using our definition of that waterfront being all the way up the Lynn River through Silver Lake to Ivy Dam and
Yeah.
all the way up Black Creek to the urban boundary and all along the Lake Erie shoreline.
Yeah.
That's all the waterfront.
And just to be clear, Jim, I'm agreeing with you generally. And we do have a policy in the plan, the draft plan today. And it's in the section that I talk about building a successful community. And there's a specific policy on waterfront acquisition that details an approach for public acquisition of opportunities to get public access. And it talks a little bit about where funds might come from.
Okay, where are you quoting that from? Can you just give me the section? You don't have to read it out. I'll just look at it later.
It's section 3,
Okay. 3 point.
subsection J.
Okay.
On page
And Jim, the not the issue, but we do have an active transportation plan. As you know, it maps out the location of the trails. And along most of the creek corridors, it's privately owned. So it's difficult for us to show even conceptually a public trail along the water's edge, like along the Black River or up the east side of Silver Lake, because it's privately owned.
Yeah, I'm just going to read you the last sentence, Jim, because I think it's really, because I've heard this before, so I wanted to make sure there was something in here. So the last sentence, the county shall pursue the acquisition of waterfront property and public access to the waterfront in appropriate locations throughout Port Dover, particular to ensure preservation of the beach within the Port Dover urban waterfront designation. So it's an overarching policy that says.
But why do you, but then, well, we'll get this into our written submission, but I think any lawyer could take that and say that the focus really is on you call it the urban waterfront. We would call it the downtown waterfront.
Well, whatever
And
you
that-
call it.
So anyways, I'll park that comment for the
There.
sake of time.
You can have a look at it, see how you want to rewrite it.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
In the yesterday or the previous session, we suggested changing the vision and taking out just the word urban and just having it as all waterfronts in the vision. And Donna thought, oh, she was very much open to that, it seemed. But Ron, just seeing your reaction, I sensed that there was some concern about
So,
making
you
a
know-
change like that. And I
Well,
just wondered.
My reaction was, well, waterfront is overarching. And that particular principle was about the urban waterfront and the downtown. I don't have any problem adding a principle that talks about the waterfront in its totality as well. There's no limit on the number of principles that we can have. And if you think that it would be useful, absolutely. Let's
Well,
go.
you see, as soon as you have adding as opposed to saying all waterfronts and treating all waterfronts with certain basic principles that apply to all waterfronts, for example, a basic principle conserving the current public access, seeking opportunities to expand that access should apply to all waterfronts.
Well,
And
and
if
that can be, we can have,
Yeah,
principles that
okay.
apply
Okay,
to certain specific areas. We can have overarching principles.
Yeah.
so
What I'm
Jim, let me just weigh in here a little bit. So I hear what you're saying. We hear what you're saying. The concern is to conserve the current locations of public access and make sure that there's opportunity to attain new public access on any waterfront land. So Ron has already said how that's being addressed in the policy with the special policy related to acquisition. We can't have an overarching direction that every inch of waterfront, whether it's along the river or lake, will be publicly accessible, because 95% of it is privately owned.
That's not what we're asking, Donna.
I think that we should add a principle
Okay,
that talks about what Jim is talking about. Protect
okay,
existing access to the waterfront
okay,
in its totality, and actively seeking additional opportunities to improve that.
okay,
That's what I'm getting at.
okay,
Yeah.
perfect.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I just want to break for just 1 second, Jim. Jennifer from the county had your hand up. Jennifer, I don't know if you want to weigh in on.
Oh no, Donna, I was just going to talk about the appendix for forestry, but it's okay.
Okay, okay.
We've moved on, so it's fine.
Okay, all right. So there you go, Jim.
Okay. I just want to be clear that that our goal here is to ensure public access and improve it where it's possible, and it's physical and visual access, and that we're not seeking any taxpayer money for any project such as the Silver Lake Revitalization Project through this process. I just want to be very clear about that and on record about that. And I'm wondering, has that been a concern in the discussions at all, that might be the case?
No,
Okay, that's good to know, because we're all on the same page. That's
The
good.
policy that I referenced did identify funding sources that a municipality typically would have if properties come up for sale that would improve access.
Yeah, okay.
So that's the kind of thing that I'm looking for. We're not concerned about where the money comes from or how it's spent. That's for another day.
Okay.
But there are sources of funding that could
there's,
be used to acquire waterfront properties.
okay, let me just pause for a second. Trish.
Hi, thanks. So
There you go, Tricia.
I just wanted to, can you hear me okay? I
Yeah,
have
we're
it
all
double
good,
muted.
Tricia. Yeah, we're
Okay.
all good.
So I just wanted to reiterate a few things because this discussion is good and positive, and we need to hear it. So I wanted to come back to the point that Norfolk County Council, as well as staff, have consistently recognized the importance of ensuring continued public access to waterfront, river and/or lake, and to explore opportunities to expand that. That has never changed. And so the purpose of today is discussing the policy recommendations. And so we're accepting the feedback that we're receiving because based on what other folks have seen, maybe there's room for us to tweak or articulate it a little bit more clear. But I wanted to state very clearly that council and staff have always wanted to ensure that there's very clear policy to protect and maintain what we have and to explore and expand future opportunities. And then the other piece would be where there's going to be development opportunity to have public access through a private development. So that's the other core piece there. So I just wanted to confirm that for everybody and sort of for the record,
Okay.
that's always been central and important to the county.
Okay, thanks, Tricia.
I'm getting near
Jim?
the end of my questions, Donna, but
Okay,
I do
go
have a few
ahead.
more.
Go ahead.
Will the county solicitor be reviewing this? Maybe this is a question of staff. And the reason I ask is that we've been through a Ontario Land Tribunal appeal where the wording in the official plan and secondary plan, they were able to identify contradictory sections and words that were used for the same thing but were stated to mean something else, or the legal argument was made. This is a legal document, really, that's a document that's going to be referred to in future appeals. So I'm just wondering, is the county solicitor going to have the opportunity to see this and have time to provide feedback?
Tricia.
The county solicitor is aware of this project and has been involved. That's all I'll say at this time.
Well, then if given that, it would be our recommendation that the county solicitor be given time to review this document and provide her input to it.
Okay.
Okay. Lastly, it's more about, and there was a bit of talk before the meeting started about sort of next steps, and I guess what we're concerned about is how much time are we going to have as an association to review this next draft before it's presented to council, because in this particular case, we're only getting basically 5 calendar days, including a weekend, after these sessions to get our information in before the working group meets. And in the worst case scenario, maybe I don't understand the process right, but I'm hoping this is not the case, that the study or the plan is going to be presented to council, in which case it would be available to us on a Friday and we'd be before council on a Tuesday. So I just wanted to
Okay, so let me clarify. Fair point. So the way it is now, we're looking for all the comments by the end of July. So you don't need to get your comments in before the working group.
Well,
meeting.
with all due respect, Donna, that working group is meeting on the 21st, and we want to have our information before that working group on the 21st to take advantage of that discussion.
Okay, then you can. Then that's fine.
Yeah.
Sorry, Jennifer, do you want to weigh in before I finish?
Yes, thanks, Donna. I just wanted to note for the record that the draft secondary plan guidelines and forestry guidelines were posted on the county website 3 weeks before this week's round of meetings. So they have been available for the public to review and kind of provide their comments on. So I just wanted to put that out there, that there's been a couple more days than 5.
But Jen, the engagement sessions are an opportunity for us to understand the secondary plan before going off and saying a number of things that would have just led to some confusion. We've benefited immensely from these sessions, so now we can, in an informed way, provide feedback.
Okay.
And and we would like to have that same more time the next time around.
So just so I'm clear, you're not suggesting that we push back our meeting
No.
with the working group? So
No, we
leave
think that we can get that in. No, it's more in terms of what the next draft is going to look like. How much time are we going to have
Yeah.
to look at that, talk with some people, get an understanding of why and why not
Yeah.
before we make our
So
submission.
Jim, we're gonna work within the rules that the Planning Act give us, and the county has their own rules about how much time material has to be out in the public before statutory public meetings. So we'll provide some direction on that following this meeting, when the community can expect to see the next draft of the secondary plan.
When would we know?
I'm saying we're gonna confirm that. We're gonna confirm the date that the next draft will be available to the public for review in advance of the statutory public meeting. Jennifer, do you have that date now?
No, I don't have the particular dates now, Donna, but Jim, I just want to assure you that through the distribution list, where I've been communicating both these sessions and just general information about the plans, I'll definitely send out a communication regarding if the documents are posted on our website for review and the date of the statutory meeting. So the information will be communicated through our distribution list, through you'll see my name in the email, but we'll definitely get that out to you.
So it doesn't go through a council process. It's like we might have a couple of weeks before the statutory public meeting. Is that?
So it will go through the public notices, the formal public process as well, but I just wanted to follow up. If you don't see the notice of the public hearing in the newspapers, or if you don't check the website regularly, we will be doing a formal notice in the Port Dover newspapers that the public hearing is happening. But I also just wanted to say that I will be following up with an email as well. It seems like more people are getting information through email, so you might hear about it quicker through that means. So I just wanted to reassure you that there will be a few mechanisms for you to be aware of what's happening. And I'll just have to follow up. I don't want to misquote the timelines, but previously there was a 2 week, I think we would notify before public hearing, about 2 weeks before.
Okay,
but
that's good.
But a plan of this nature, I'm not sure. We'll have to work with Donna and her team just to see what the timelines will actually be, but that will all be communicated with everyone.
Just to add to that, Jim, when the notification for the public meeting is made, the document has to be available.
Right.
So my experience in other municipalities, it's 2 weeks, 30 days, something. They have their own policies. I'm not aware, but it's always at least 2 weeks.
Okay. Well, 2 weeks I would see as an absolute minimum, but 30 days would be really nice. But I'll leave that. I'll leave that.
I just want to go back to one other thing about the Ontario Land Tribunal, formerly LPAC, formerly OMB, and who knows what it'll be next week. I do that for a living, and I try to write secondary plans to consider multiple interpretive approaches and try to get rid of the opportunity to do that. That's a long way of saying I try to write it so that I say what I mean.
Okay, thanks, Ron. Okay, Jim, I'm gonna just.
That's it for my question.
Okay.
I look forward to your review so that we can have a conversation to make sure I'm saying what I mean and it means the same thing to you.
Good.
Thanks, Ron. Kathleen or Kay and Marion and Noah and Scott. Okay, I'm not seeing any other microphones coming on. Is there anything that anyone else wants to share? It was a great conversation. Jennifer, anything else from your end? Any follow-up or any other clarification on bulk of Jim's comments? Oh, there's Tricia. Go ahead, Tricia. There you go.
Am I on?
Yeah, you're
Okay,
good.
I can't
You're
see
good.
myself, so I don't know if
You're
my
good.
video is working or not.
You're good.
And Jennifer, sorry if I cut you off. So if anybody's feeling shy or you have things to say, but you're not comfortable saying them in this venue, you can reach out on the website, and perhaps at the end we'll confirm contact information. You can reach out directly to the planning partnership. There is an email set up for this project, or you can reach out to myself or Jennifer. If you have particular input or questions that you want to share, but you're feeling uncomfortable to do it right now online. So there are other opportunities to give input.
Maybe Jan, can you just put your email address and Tricia's in the chat box so everybody sees it? I know there's the project webpage is a really good source of all the information on the project. So. Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands going up or microphones coming on. Tricia, that's the hand from before, I'm assuming. Yeah, there we go. And there's the web page that Jennifer's sharing with everyone. So with that, I really want to thank everybody for carving out a bit of time this afternoon to have a focused conversation on natural features. And as you heard Tricia say, and you see on the chat box now, the opportunities to provide additional input if you'd like. And so with that, I will end the recording and end the meeting on everyone's behalf. And we really look forward, as Ron said, to receiving the comments and putting together the next draft. Tricia, did you want to say something before I wrap up?
No, I just wanted to
Okay.
say thank you to everyone. And again, we have another session this afternoon, so hopefully folks will be able to join us then. And then there will be statutory notifications. So there'll be further newspaper notifications and opportunities to give input before this is before council. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you. I will end the meeting on everyone's behalf. Thanks so much.